What happened on the streets of Upper Midtown Manhattan on the evening of Monday, 8th December 1980 was to reverberate around the world. But the ramifications of the extraordinary assassination of an extraordinary musician were to be felt for decades afterwards and would forever change the way famous people interact with their fans. Right across the latter part of 1980, a young man with a troubled mind had made up his mind to kill a famous person. By the end of the year, he'd honed in on someone with global recognition. The aspirant killer was Mark David Chapman. His target was John Lennon. How Chapman ended up in Manhattan with a gun in his hand that night is a complex and often misunderstood story.
The public perception would describe the defendant as a crazed Beatle fan who was obsessed about John Lennon, and we didn't find that to be the case. He was obsessed about himself. He was obsessed about bringing attention to himself to steal, in effect, the fame of another individual.
But despite outward appearances, all was not what it seemed in the Chapman household.
I think he had a good relationship with his mother, but he told me that his father was abusive toward the family. And I don't know if that was mentally or physical, I'm not sure, but he did not have a good relationship with his father.
Mark's mother was very narcissistic, and she had, from the day he was born, told him things like, "The only reason I married your father was to have you for my child. You're going to be great. You can do anything you want to do." And he grew up with ideas that he was something really special, and the world was going to be the path to his door.
The expectation fell far short of the reality.
Nothing special about him. I thought he was a little reclusive. He wasn't good at sports. He didn't do well at school.
Gravitated to a group of kids as a young adolescent, taking drugs because that's where he could kind of show off.
And not just marijuana. He did pharmaceuticals, LSD, several times, he told me.
Talked about feeling very despondent and bad, and while he was tripping on acid, praying to be saved, and God coming down through the ceiling and God sitting on his knee.
Then, just as suddenly, his rebellious phase ended. At 16, Mark became an evangelical Christian, and his temperament changed just as abruptly.
Somehow, during his formative years, drugs and an overnight LSD conversion to extremist Christianity, seeing himself as almost some kind of, rock star.
He actually, at one point in high school, became what we called a Jesus freak. He wore a big cross around his neck. He was passing pamphlets out to other students.
Mark found a calling in youth leadership.
Mark and I were in the same Boy Scout troop, and then later on, when we were teenagers, we both were day camp counselors for the YMCA. You did various activities during the day. There was archery. There was riflery, playing ball, and then you went swimming every day. He went to Arkansas with the YMCA for the Vietnamese refugees. The kids loved him. They loved him. He was so good at it. He was Counselor of the Year every year.
The 1970s also marked a significant turning point for one of music's most notable and popular global figures. John Lennon had achieved global success and fame as a member of the Beatles.
Some of the fences hold, but authorities feel that
you can't overstate the popularity of the Beatles.
They were everything. They were all of culture. They encapsulated everything that was wonderful and delightful about popular culture.
John Lennon was famous all over the Western world.
He was the most edgy and the least willing to play the celebrity game in some ways.
John had famously even snubbed Britain's aristocracy, albeit somewhat tongue-in-cheek.
But the people in the cheaper seats clap your hands. And the rest of you, if you just rattle your jewelry.
It is sort of an ugly time, you know, with Vietnam and, you know, and a lot of real unrest and happiness, assassinations, all that happening. The Beatles were an antidote to this. He was sort of rebellious and he would, you know, give the finger to people and just do things that were unpopular. And then, of course, this made us love him.
After an acrimonious split from his fellow Beatles, John Lennon had moved to New York.
He was, in a way, sort of publicly available. He's living on, you know, on Central Park West. He's out there. He's in the city. He's going to studios. He's appearing or wherever. He's with Yoko. He's a father. He has a 5-year-old son. He is trying to be a family man. They were an interesting New York couple. But it wasn't necessarily much more than that, and he wasn't aspiring to much more than that. He did not seek the limelight. There was no grandiosity that I could see in what he was doing. There was almost a certain modesty in what he was doing.
He traveled to New York determined to carry out an assassination. His target, it appeared, was only one on a short list.
He had, in effect, a hit list. He had thought about killing other people. Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, George C. Scott, Johnny Carson, who was at that point the host of The Tonight Show in New York City.
Perversely, Mark's dead-end job as a security guard was about to help his cause.
The fact that he had worked as a security guard at the airport was significant because he came to New York City twice. He came about 2 weeks or so before December 8th, 1980, and knew from his experience as a security guard at the airport that he could put the gun in the checked baggage and it wouldn't be discovered. So he brought the gun with him to New York City and tried to buy bullets for it, hadn't brought any bullets with him. He looked around trying to see if there were famous people around that he could get access to, but ultimately with no bullets, he went back to Hawaii.
Leading a protest against the Beatles because of certain anti-Christian and anti-American statements they made, which appeared in a national teenage magazine. But this is your fight, not ours.
Even after leaving New York, going back home, trying to clean up, within a matter of a few months, you know, the obsession started grinding again.
He returned, this time coming through an intermediate city where he met with someone who was able to supply him with hollow point bullets. He actually went with that individual out into a wooded area and practiced shooting the gun.
At 5 o'clock, John Lennon and Yoko Ono left the Dakota.
Lennon goes down into the basement of his apartment building, the Dakota, and he runs into Chapman, who's been waiting for him there. And Chapman, and Lennon's completely accessible, and Chapman gets him to sign an album.
He remembers John being very courteous to him, taking, you know, his Double Fantasy album, signing it. He had just bought that album to be more convincing. It was, you know, it was part of his subterfuge. And to his amazement, John shows up and takes the album and signs it for him.
Paul Gorish was one of the people who would hang out at the Dakota for a chance to see John Lennon. Took many pictures of him over the years. He actually captured that photograph of John Lennon signing the defendant's record album.
At that point, I think in his own mind, he became a legitimate Beatle fan. I mean, he was awestruck.
And Lennon goes on his way. Then he goes and works. He's a working man. And he goes and works, and then he comes back.
John and Yoko arrived back from the recording studio at around 11.
It was a Monday night, cold December. Most people drifted away. Mark was there alone. He described watching the limo pull up, knowing somehow that it was John and Yoko who were in it. Had his hand on the gun, the safety off, knowing even before John's limo came in to sight, he heard a vehicle and he just knew. And this is the moment, and this is when I'm going to do what I came here to do.